Hey, welcome back to the channel. In this week's video, we're going to talk about the big development news story, Curve, which is the tallest passive house tower that was planned for downtown Vancouver, now facing receivership. We're going to talk about exactly what went wrong along the way, and I also want to talk about what I believe is the biggest issue when it comes to these downtown projects. Real quick, before we get started though, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hasan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. When I'm not making videos like this, I'm helping people just like you buy and sell real estate across the Lower Mainland. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to chat with me about your real estate situation, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below or on screen, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. All right, we're going to hop right into it. I hope you had a wonderful week. Just coming off the news of yet another development project, specifically in downtown Vancouver, that is facing receivership, unlikely to proceed as a project. This is the project called Curve, and this was set to be a 60-story passive house tower. If you're unfamiliar with passive house, it basically means that it meets a certain energy standard. So it was at one of the highest energy standards out there for buildings, would have been the tallest in Canada, in downtown Vancouver. At this point, not moving ahead. We're going to talk about what exactly happened during this process, because this is one of those projects that just consistently found itself in the news. Not necessarily negative, not necessarily positive, just everyone knew in the industry and out of the industry, everyone knew about this project as it was coming along. They introduced some really creative sales strategies, which we'll talk about. But really what we're going to get into, the crux of this video, is what's happening with the downtown development market, what really impacted this project and so many other projects, and how there could be a better solution out there. So let's start with this project here. Now, what happens in downtown, and this would be part of the West End plan, if you will. So what happens is, as a developer, when you want to do a development like this, you have to allocate a certain amount of units for specific housing categories. So what I mean by that is you have a tower, and you can have a certain amount of units that are condos that you can actually sell. And then you'll have a certain amount of units that are market rentals, which you can rent at market value. And then you'll have a certain amount of units that you need to offer for social housing. And so we'll touch on that in a sec. What happened with this project is when they launched, there was a ton of media surrounding it, because one of their sales promotions when they launched was purchase a unit, get a Porsche. And so this made the headlines all over the place. It was all over social media. People were coming to purchase units, and they were in fact purchasing units and awaiting their Porsche at completion, which obviously is not going to happen at this point. But heavy into the marketing and heavy with the promotion. In fact, they did sell quite a number of units as they got rolling. But as we all know, if you've been watching my channel for a little bit, a lot has changed with the downtown development market over the last 3 or 4 years. Now, this project, it's launching at the time where things really are changing when it comes to buyer demand. Downtown Vancouver has been propped up by foreign money, foreign investment, as we know, and obviously a lot of that has shifted away over the last several years. And it's just, it's a larger picture of what's happening with pre-sales right across Metro Vancouver for people that purchased in 2020, 2021. So this project comes out, and they launched some creative marketing tactics. And how it works is you have to basically sell a certain amount of units, a percentage of your entire building, for the lender to give you financing. And you have to do that, I should say, you had to do that within a 12-month span. And so they were getting to the 12-month span. They weren't going to hit the minimum amount of units. And if you don't hit that number, you essentially you don't have to cancel the project, but the buyers have the ability to get their deposits back and walk away. Now, what happened is it got legislated for certain types of projects over a certain size, that 12 months now can be up to 18 months. And the reason for that is to encourage developers to start a marketing campaign, start trying to sell units now, get started on the sales process. Because what happens in a slower market like today, developers are looking at a 12-month time frame to hit 65 or 75% of units, and they're saying, why would I do that? So this project kind of was in the middle of that. They didn't make the shift because of this project specifically. This was an issue with a lot of developments, but basically this project, Curve, was able to take advantage of that and get some additional time to be able to sell those units and get that extension to 18 months. Now, circling back to what I mentioned about having the different components, the different housing components within a building, this project originally was to have 20%, over 20% of the units denoted to social housing. Social housing obviously being rented at below market rents. And this is not a new thing. The West End policy, I believe they were actually at one point 25% of a building of a tower in the West End needed to be allocated for social housing. And so what happened with this project is they were able to do a couple of things. This was last year. Basically, what they said was, okay, you don't have to do 25%. You can do 20%, just over 20% social housing, or you can pay us cash. This is what the city said. Pay us cash, $55 million. You don't have to have social housing within this building. We'll take the $55 million, we'll put it towards social housing elsewhere. You can now, use those units at market, whether it's market rent or stratified condo. And what that does is it helps the books for the developer, right? Because it allows them to sell at market or rent at market. Now, you got to think with a lot of these projects here in downtown, wherever they might be, they're not picking up the land below market. We're talking about downtown Vancouver. This is a project that was on Nelson between Burrard and Thurlow, one of the most prime pieces of real estate, overall across the country. If you look at it, it's not obviously Cole Harbour at the waterfront, but it's a highly valued piece of real estate. And when you're purchasing the land at such a high cost, and then you're being asked to provide 20 to 25% of those units in a social housing capacity in the world's tallest passive house tower, in a luxury tower, it just doesn't add up. Now, you might think, okay, maybe one of the reasons for this is, the current site, maybe it's displacing a whole bunch of rentals or a whole bunch of people that are on lower rents. And so you could maybe look at it and say, okay, well, you have to replace those, of course. And so this site, it's a 2-lot site, had rentals on it, 50 rentals on it. And the amount of social housing units that needed to be in this project were over 100. And so again, the city says, okay, well, you don't have to do that. You can pay us $55 million. But $55 million, the debt on this project alone was $90 million. So the city fee, in order to not have to have social housing, would have been over half of the debt. And then the city would take that money and use it elsewhere. So from a developer standpoint, how do you make the books work when you're buying the land? I think the land assessment on these two properties, $40 million, that's the assessment. That's not what they purchased it for. Today's assessment, it was higher before when it was purchased. But how do you make the numbers work when you have 20 to 25% of the units that you're doing below market? And, realistically speaking, when you're selling a tower like this, again, world's tallest passive house tower, it's an iconic tower, you're going to purchasers, and purchasers are looking at it and saying, okay, well, 20% of this building is social housing. Like it's not a draw. And I don't mean to sound elitist or anything like that, but when I look at a project like this, I look at the West End, you see all of these projects getting canceled because of this requirement to have all of this below market housing. Now, in my opinion, paying cash in lieu of is appropriate. I think for me, and tell me if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, but for me, I think, if they take cash in lieu and they take that money to provide and create social housing in areas where the land costs are not as high, they can actually build out more social housing units. And there's a lot of good communities around Vancouver, if we look outside of downtown, that have that community feel, have amenities around them that are walkable. Why does it have to be in downtown Vancouver in luxury towers? And you're basically going to a developer and saying, it's almost like ransom. You got to pay us this huge check in order to not have the social housing within this building. But there's other ways. I think if they were to manage what that fee might be and make it way more reasonable and actually use the funds in areas where it'll go further, you'll have better luck with these projects. Now, I mentioned with Curve, they were in the headlines both for positive things and not so great things. They had some struggles along the way, obviously, as they're trying to sell units. They had one purchaser purchase 4 units and only pay the first deposit and never pay another deposit. And when you do the math, we don't have the exact numbers, but it looks like the value of these units would have been around $40 million. Paid the first deposit, never paid any more. So they were actually litigating against that purchaser. There were all of these issues that were coming up. Not only the social housing thing, but they had to restructure part of the development as well and basically adjust that development plan to try and make the numbers work. So they were doing everything in their power. But really, the crux of what happened here is you had a severely high land cost, you had demand fall off a cliff, and you had a requirement to just have an exorbitant amount of units that you're offering below market. Now, I did a video about this specific topic in terms of social housing, like where should we have social housing? What should the developer responsibility be for social housing versus the different layers of government? Posted on my social media, got a lot of interaction. I would love to hear your thoughts. Like, am I out to lunch thinking that having social housing in these luxury towers in high-end locations in downtown doesn't work? I don't believe it works. I feel like if you work 6 days a week, you're working 10-hour days, you work a professional job, and if you can't afford to live in a certain building because of where it is or the type of building it is or how high-end that building is, who deserves to live in that building? And I completely understand and agree the need for social housing and affordable housing options for people to live in the cities in which they work. We're very lucky and fortunate, I would say, in Vancouver, where we have a pretty good SkyTrain and transit system that can get people around the core of the city. So I agree that we need to have people living in the cities in which they work and being able to afford a roof over their head. But for me, again, West End, close to the beach, this is an international destination where people from all over the world want to live, want to invest in normal times, and you're having such a large requirement of affordable units. How can you offer affordable units when the land is not affordable? The building costs are not affordable. You're building passive house, so already your expenses are even higher than your standard downtown build. Even having curvature to the building increases the cost of the build. So again, iconic tower, do we need 20% plus? Do we need 20% even social housing units in a tower like this? Tell me what you think. Now, in terms of next steps, what's going to happen here, it's much too early to tell. But I will do a follow-up video for sure as we get more information. But again, this is just one development we've talked about. If you followed my channel for a bit, every 2-3 months we're doing a video on a new project. A lot of the pain is centered around downtown Vancouver, again, because of that high land cost. But we can expect to hear more of this. And again, I'll keep you posted on what's going to happen moving forward, specifically with this project. So I hope you learned something from this video. If you have any questions, you have any thoughts, put them in the comment section below. And again, like I mentioned off the top, if you want to talk about your own real estate situation with me, book me for a call or just give me a call, send me a text. My contact info is in the description box. But I want to thank you so much for watching this week's video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.